everyone. Welcome back to Business English Desk. I'm Laura.
And I'm Jamie. Laura, I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest with me.
That is a very intense way to start a Monday.
It's important. So yesterday, I was in a conversation with some colleagues. Very casual, very relaxed. And someone said something I disagreed with, so I said, and I quote, "I could care less about that approach."
Okay.
And the whole table went quiet. Like that specific kind of quiet where you know you've said something wrong, but you have no idea what.
How long did the quiet last?
Long enough for me to start questioning every life decision I've ever made.
Okay, so here's the thing. What you said, "I could care less," is actually one of the most commonly misused expressions in English. Even native speakers get it wrong.
All the time. Wait, native speakers get it wrong?
Constantly. And it's not just that one. Today, we're covering 4 expressions that people use every day in meetings, in conversations, in emails, in arguments, and most of them are using them at least slightly wrong.
Which means that right now, there are people watching this who have been using one of these expressions for years, thinking they sound fluent and actually
sending a slightly different message than they intended.
That's a very uncomfortable thought.
It is, but the good news is, by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly how to use all 4 correctly, and you'll probably never mishear them the same way again.
Which honestly feels like a superpower.
It kind of is. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first expression we're looking at today is one I hear in professional settings almost every single week. Someone in a meeting will say, "For all intents and purposes, the project is complete." Or a manager will say, "For all intents and purposes, we can consider this resolved." And it sounds very polished, very authoritative, very much like the person saying it knows exactly what they're doing.
It does have a very confident ring to it, like the kind of phrase that makes people take notes.
Exactly, and that's why people love using it. It elevates whatever you're saying immediately. But here's where the problem begins, and this is a very widespread problem.
How widespread?
Extremely widespread. A huge number of people, and again, I want to emphasize this, including educated native speakers, including professionals in high-level jobs, say "for all intensive purposes" instead of "for all intents and purposes."
Wait, intensive purposes? That's not the right phrase?
It is not the right phrase. Intensive purposes does not exist as a concept. There is no such thing as an intensive purpose. The correct phrase is intents and purposes, 2 separate and distinct words. Intents and purposes.
Okay, I need to be honest here. I have absolutely said intensive purposes before in my life, more than once, possibly in front of important people.
You are in very good company. It is one of the most common mishearings in the English language, and there's actually a technical term for this kind of error. It's called an eggcorn.
An eggcorn? What is an eggcorn?
So, an eggcorn is when someone mishears a word or phrase and replaces it with something that sounds similar but means something different. The term itself comes from someone who wrote eggcorn instead of acorn, because when you say acorn quickly and naturally, it can sound like eggcorn, and a linguist found it and thought, that is the perfect name for this phenomenon.
So intensive purposes is an eggcorn of intents and purposes. Because when someone says intents and purposes quickly in conversation, it can genuinely sound like intensive purposes.
Especially in connected speech. When we speak naturally, we don't say each word separately. We blend them together. "For all intents and purposes," said quickly in an American accent, can genuinely blur into something that sounds like intensive purposes. So it's an understandable mistake, but it is still a mistake.
So what does the expression actually mean? Let's make sure we've got the foundation right.
Absolutely. For all intents and purposes means in every practical sense, in every way that actually matters. It describes a situation where something is effectively true, even if technically it might not be 100% complete or formally finalized. You're saying, in every meaningful way, this is the case.
So it's a way of acknowledging that something is
Practically done, or practically true, even if the last 1% is still pending. Exactly. So if a project is 98% complete, all the major decisions are made, all the important work is done, you're just waiting on a final signature, you could say, for all intents and purposes, this project is finished.
because in every way that actually matters, it is.
Correct. And that's what makes this phrase so useful in professional settings. Instead of saying, well, it's almost done, but not quite, and there's still this one small thing, but the main parts are complete and we're just waiting on, you cut all of that and say, for all intents and purposes, it's done. Clean, precise, professional.
I can think of so many times I could have used this in meetings instead of rambling.
Yes, it is an excellent rambling prevention tool. Now, let me give you a few more examples so you can really feel how it works in different contexts.
Please.
She hasn't officially been given the title yet, but for all intents and purposes, she is running the department.
Perfect. That's exactly right. Officially, it hasn't happened, but practically speaking, it has. And one more. The negotiation went on for 3 more weeks, but for all intents and purposes, the deal was done after that first meeting.
I love how it creates that sense of, okay, let's stop pretending and acknowledge what is actually happening.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's an expression that cuts through formality and gets to the practical reality of the situation.
Now, the mistakes. Apart from intensive purposes, which we have covered very thoroughly, there are a couple of other things to watch for. First, the word is and, not or. It's always intents and purposes, not intents or purposes. That small change shifts the logic of the whole phrase.
Because and connects them, or separates them, and the expression is about both together.
Exactly. And second, register. This is a formal expression. It belongs in professional conversations, presentations, business writing, formal emails. You probably wouldn't use it in a very casual text to a friend. For all intents and purposes, I want pizza tonight doesn't quite work.
It makes the pizza sound legally binding. Save it for contexts where that level of formality actually fits.
Formal settings, professional conversations, important emails.
Got it.
Perfect. Now let's do the quiz.
Right. 3 options. Which one is correct? Option 1. For all intensive purposes, the meeting went well. Option 2. For all intents and purposes, the meeting went well. Option 3. For all intents or purposes, the meeting went well.
Take a moment. Think about what we just discussed.
The answer is option 2, for all intents and purposes. Option 1 has intensive, which is the eggcorn mistake. We've eliminated that one.
Option 3 has or instead of and, which breaks the logic of the phrase. It's always and, always.
And honestly, if you want a simple trick to remember it, think about what the phrase means in every practical sense. Intents refers to what is intended. Purposes refers to what is meant to be achieved. Together, they cover every angle, every meaningful dimension of the situation. That's why they go with and, not or.
That actually makes it very memorable. Both words together covering everything. Once you understand the logic, you never need to memorize it. It just makes sense.
Which is exactly what we were saying earlier about truly knowing an expression versus just knowing what it sounds like.
Exactly. And we're going to keep coming back to that idea throughout today's episode because it applies to all 4. Okay, so this next one, I'll be upfront about something. I have used this expression many times in professional situations, with managers, with clients, very confidently. And I am now sitting here wondering if I've been saying it wrong the whole time. How do you say it?
I say we should nip it in the butt.
Oh, Jamie.
That's wrong, isn't it?
That is the single most common mistake with this expression, possibly one of the most common mistakes in English idioms generally. It is not the but. It is the bud, B-U-D, like a flower bud.
Not the other kind.
Definitely not the other kind.
Okay, I need a moment to process this because I have said nip it in the butt to a client during a video call. Very seriously, very professionally, while wearing a nice shirt.
And what did they say?
They nodded, which I now realize was not agreement. That was them very kindly not correcting me.
People are usually very kind about this one, probably because it's such a common mistake that they've heard it before, or maybe they've made it themselves. But regardless, let's fix it properly right now, so you never have to wonder again.
Please, yes, let's fix it.
So, nip it in the bud comes from gardening, which is a very English origin when you think about it. The English have an extraordinary relationship with their gardens.
They really do. I've never met a nation more emotionally invested in plant growth.
So when a plant is in its early stages of growth, before it flowers, it produces buds, small, closed, tightly wrapped little flowers that haven't opened yet. If you nip a bud, meaning pinch it off with your fingers or a small tool, the flower never develops. You have stopped the growth at its earliest possible stage.
So figuratively, nip it in the bud means to deal with something while it is still small, before it has the chance to grow into a bigger problem.
Exactly. And the timing element is the most important part of this expression. Nip it in the bud is specifically about early intervention, catching something at the very beginning of its development and stopping it there.
So it's not just about solving a problem, it's about solving it at the right time, which is early.
Right. And that distinction matters a lot in professional settings because the value of nipping something in the bud is precisely that you acted early, before things escalated, before more people were affected, before it became much harder to fix.
So let me think of some real examples. If two team members start showing signs of friction, a small disagreement here, a tense exchange there, and a manager decides to address it immediately before it affects the rest of the team, that manager is nipping it in the bud.
Yes, perfectly used. Or if a new employee starts developing a habit that might cause problems, arriving a few minutes late, missing small deadlines, and their manager has a quiet conversation in the first week rather than waiting until it becomes a pattern.
That is a perfect example because the key is that it's still early. The habit hasn't solidified yet. The conflict hasn't escalated yet. There is still time to redirect things before they become genuinely difficult.
And if you wait until the problem is already large, the expression no longer fits.
Correct. If the two team members have been in open conflict for 3 months and have already involved HR and the whole office knows about it, you can't nip it in the bud at that point. The bud has become a full flower, a very difficult flower.
A very thorny flower.
Extremely thorny. So save this expression for situations where you're still in the early stages, where action now will prevent something larger later. That is its natural home.
What about in writing, in emails? Would it work there?
Absolutely. It fits professional emails between colleagues, team communication, messages to managers. It's not overly formal, but it's not too casual either. It sits right in the middle, which makes it very versatile.
So you could write, I noticed some confusion around the new process. I think we should nip this in the bud before it affects the whole team.
That is completely natural, sounds professional, communicates urgency without being alarmist, and signals that you are someone who thinks ahead, which is always a good impression to make.
I like that. It's a small expression that says a lot about the person using it.
It really does. It says you're proactive, you're observant, you care about preventing problems rather than just solving them after the fact.
Now, the other mistake beyond but versus bud, are there any others?
Yes, a couple. The first one we've already touched on, using it when the problem is already fully developed. That's the timing mistake.
The second is a grammatical one. Nip it in the bud works as a phrase, but some some learners try to change the structure and it starts to fall apart.
For example, we should bud nip this, or let's get the bud nipped. Those don't work. The expression has a fixed structure. Nip it in the bud. Keep it intact.
Don't try to be creative with the word order.
The idiom has a form. Respect the form. Change the form, and it stops being the idiom.
Clear. Okay, let's quiz. Scenario. You are in a weekly team meeting. Someone mentions that a few clients have sent slightly negative feedback about response times. It has only happened twice. It's not yet a pattern, but it could become one. Your manager turns to you and asks, "What should we do about this?"
What do you say?
Take a moment, think about the expression and the timing. A natural response would be something like, "I think we should nip this in the bud now before it becomes a recurring issue. Maybe we set a response time target for the whole team this week."
And notice what makes that answer strong. It uses nip it in the bud in the right context. Early stage, not yet a big problem, and it follows immediately with a proposed solution, which is exactly what fluent professional speakers do. They don't just name the problem, they move toward fixing it.
That combination, idiom plus proposed action, is very natural in English workplace conversations, and it makes the speaker sound not just fluent, but competent.
Two things at the same time. I appreciate efficiency.
And I'm still thinking about your client call.
We don't need to keep revisiting that, Laura.
Moving on. Okay, this is the one that started everything today. The expression that got Jamie into a very quiet room yesterday.
Yes, let's talk about this one properly, because I genuinely did not know I was using it incorrectly. And based on what you said earlier, neither do a lot of people.
A lot of people. So let's start with what most people say. I could care less. And what they mean by it is, I have absolutely no interest in this. I don't care at all. This matters zero to me.
Which is how I've always used it and always heard it used. Oh, I could care less about office politics, meaning I have no interest in office politics.
And here is the logical problem with that sentence. If you could care less, it means you do care, at least a little. Because if there were zero caring happening, you wouldn't be able to care less. You'd already be at the lowest possible point.
Oh.
To say I could care less literally means my level of caring is above zero. There is room to go lower. I could theoretically care even less than I do now, which means I care some amount currently.
So when I said I could care less about that approach, I was technically saying I care about this approach some amount.
Technically, yes.
Which is the opposite of what I meant.
Completely opposite. The correct expression is I couldn't care less. Couldn't with the negative. Because if you couldn't care less, your caring level is already at zero. It cannot go any lower. You have reached the absolute floor of not caring.
That is such a logical distinction, and I have been ignoring logic my entire life with this expression.
Again, you are in extraordinary company. This is one of the most widespread usage errors in English. And what makes it particularly interesting from a linguistic perspective is that it's so common that some linguists and language experts have actually argued that I could care less has become acceptable through sheer frequency of use.
So the wrong version became so popular that it might actually be becoming correct in very informal contexts, particularly in American English. Some people argue yes. The meaning has been understood by context for so long that the expression has taken on a life of its own.
Language is fascinating and slightly chaotic.
It really is. But here's why this matters for learners specifically. If you are learning English and you want to sound precise, if you want to be someone who truly understands the expressions they use, knowing that couldn't is the correct form gives you an advantage because you understand the logic, not just the sound.
And understanding the logic means you'll never confuse it. Exactly. Now, in terms of how to use it correctly.
I couldn't care less what they decided to call the new product. Let's just launch it.
Perfect. Zero interest, moving on. Honestly, I couldn't care less which software we use. Both will do the job. Let's just decide.
She said she couldn't care less about the formatting of the report, she just wants the content to be right.
Exactly. And notice how in all of those examples, there's often something that follows: a redirect, a proposed action, a focus on what does matter. Because in professional settings, expressing strong indifference is most powerful when you follow it with what you actually care about.
So it's not just about dismissing something, it's about making space for what's important.
Beautifully put. And that's a very sophisticated way to use this expression. I couldn't care less about X, what I do care about is Y. That structure in professional conversation signals clarity, prioritization, and focus.
So the expression can actually make you sound like a strong communicator, not just someone expressing indifference.
If used well, absolutely. Now, register. This expression is casual to neutral. It fits team conversations, informal emails, verbal discussions. You probably would not open a presentation with, "I couldn't care less about last year's figures," unless you are going for a very specific effect.
A memorable effect.
A very memorable effect that might end your career.
Noted.
Save it for appropriate moments of genuine indifference, where you want to clearly and honestly signal that something is simply not a priority for you.
And always say couldn't, not could.
That is the rule. That is the one rule for this expression. Couldn't. Never could.
I'm going to say it 5 times right now in my head.
Please do. Quiz time.
Simple. Which sentence is correct? Option 1. I could care less about the new office layout. It doesn't affect my work. Option 2. I couldn't care less about the new office layout. It doesn't affect my work.
Think about the logic. Which one actually means I have zero interest in this topic?
Option 2, I couldn't care less. Because if you couldn't care less, your caring level is at 0. You cannot go any lower. Option 1, I could care less, actually implies you do care something, which contradicts the rest of the sentence.
And here is something interesting to notice about that example sentence. It doesn't affect my work is the reason given for the indifference. And in natural conversation, giving a reason for your indifference makes it sound much more thoughtful and professional, rather than just dismissing something randomly.
So the full package is, I couldn't care less plus the reason why, because it doesn't affect what I'm here to do.
That is a very complete and confident professional response. Use it wisely.
I will, with 2 Ds. Couldn't.
With 2 Ds. Okay, last one, and I'll be fully transparent. I use this expression fairly regularly. I use it confidently. I use it in meetings with senior people. And I am now sitting here with a very specific feeling of dread.
How do you use it?
I say things like, that begs the question, why did we change the strategy in the first place? Or, which begs the question, who actually approved this? And that is exactly how the majority of people use this expression, including most native speakers, including journalists, television presenters, business leaders.
Okay, I feel better.
Hold on, because here's the interesting part. You're not entirely wrong, but you're also not entirely right.
That is simultaneously the most and least reassuring thing you could have said.
Let me explain. Beg the question has what linguists call 2 lives in English, an original meaning, which is technical and philosophical, and a popular meaning, which is what most people use today. And these 2 meanings are completely different from each other.
Okay, start with the original.
The original meaning comes from philosophy, specifically from formal logic, and it is a translation of a Latin phrase, petitio principii, which roughly means assuming the initial point. In logical argumentation, to beg the question means to use your conclusion as one of your premises. In other words, circular reasoning. Your argument assumes what it's trying to prove.
Can you give me an example, because that's a very abstract concept?
Absolutely. Imagine someone says, this is the best policy because it's better than all other policies. Do you see the problem?
They're saying it's the best by saying it's better, which is the same thing. They haven't actually proven why it's the best.
Exactly. They've used their conclusion, it's the best, as their evidence, because it's better, which is circular. Philosophically speaking, that argument begs the question, because it doesn't actually answer the question. It just restates the conclusion in different words.
That's actually a really important concept beyond just this expression. That's a whole type of bad reasoning.
It is, and that's why it's so useful in academic contexts, in debates, in situations where you're analyzing the quality of an argument. If someone's reasoning is circular, you can say, that begs the question in the original sense, and anyone who knows the term will understand that you've identified a logical fallacy.
A logical fallacy. In everyday English, that means a flaw in the reasoning.
Correct, a fundamental error in the logic of an argument. Begging the question in its original sense is a specific and serious one.
Okay, so that's the original meaning. Now what's the popular meaning? The one that I use and apparently most people use.
The popular meaning has evolved over the last few decades, particularly in American English, and it essentially means raises the question or prompts me to ask. So when you say, that begs the question, why did we change the strategy? What you mean is, that makes me want to ask, why did we change the strategy?
Which is intuitive if you think about the word begs, like the situation is almost begging you to ask the question, pleading with you to acknowledge it.
And that's actually a very natural interpretation of the word, which is probably why this usage spreads so widely. It feels logical in a different way, like the situation is demanding that you ask this question.
So how do I navigate this? Because now I know there are two meanings, and I don't want to use the popular one in front of someone who only recognizes the original.
That is exactly the right concern. And here is the most practical advice I can give you. If you want to be absolutely safe in every context, use raises the question when you mean raises the question. Raises the question is clean, unambiguous. Every single person will understand it exactly the way you intend it. Nobody will ever raise an eyebrow at raises the question.
So raises the question is the always safe option.
Always safe, always clear, never misunderstood. Save begs the question in its original philosophical sense for situations where you genuinely want to point out circular reasoning.
Which in daily professional life might not be that frequently, but it's good to know.
It's extremely good to know, because when you do need it in that sense, using it correctly signals a level of intellectual precision that makes a very strong impression.
It says, I know exactly what this means and I'm using it deliberately.
Exactly, rather than just reaching for it because it sounds smart.
Which is how most people use it, including past Jamie.
Past Jamie was in good company. Future Jamie is in even better company because now you know the full picture.
I feel significantly smarter right now. Is that an appropriate thing to say?
I think it's appropriate. Okay, let's talk about one more nuance before the quiz, which is about where you would and wouldn't use each version.
Please.
Begs the question in the popular sense, meaning raises the question, works fine in casual professional conversation, informal meetings, verbal discussions, team chats. It's widely understood in those settings.
But in formal writing, reports, academic papers, official documents,
In those contexts, if you write this begs the question, meaning raises the question, there's a real chance that someone who knows the original meaning will question your use of the phrase. And in formal writing, where precision matters, that's a risk worth avoiding. Just write, this raises the question, and move on.
clean, precise, no ambiguity, everyone's happy.
Everyone's happy. Okay, final quiz. I'm going to give you two sentences. One uses begs the question in the philosophical sense, the other uses it in the popular sense. Can you identify which is which? Sentence 1. The report says the new system is more efficient because it performs better than the old one, but that really begs the question since we haven't defined what better performance actually means in this context. Sentence 2. The project was delayed by another 2 weeks, which begs the question, were the original deadlines ever actually realistic?
Take a moment.
Sentence 1 uses begs the question in the philosophical sense. The argument is circular. They're saying the system is more efficient because it performs better than the old one. But performs better is just another way of saying more efficient. The conclusion is being used as the evidence. That is the logical fallacy.
And sentence 2 uses it in the popular sense, meaning raises the question. It's prompting the listener to ask, were the original deadlines ever actually realistic? No circular logic, just a question being raised by the situation.
Exactly right. And notice how different the two feel once you know the original meaning. Sentence 1 feels precise and analytical. Sentence 2 feels conversational and natural. They are the same expression doing completely different work in completely different contexts.
And now I can tell the difference, which means I can use each one appropriately.
That is exactly what today is about. Not just learning expressions, but understanding them deeply enough to make real choices about how you use them. Okay, let's put all 4 together in one natural conversation. Jamie and I are going to do a role play, and your job is to listen carefully and try to catch all 4 expressions as they come up. Ready?
Ready. So the scenario is a Monday morning team check-in. Laura is the team lead. I'm a team member. We're reviewing a client project that has hit some early complications.
Good morning, everyone. Let's get started. Jamie, can you give us a quick update on the Henderson account?
Of course. So for all intents and purposes, the research phase is complete. We have everything we need from the client, the briefs are done, the data is in. The only complication is the timeline has shifted by about a week.
Right, and that timeline shift is exactly what I wanted to address today. It begs the question, did we underestimate the scope of this project at the planning stage? Because if we did, we need to know that now rather than later.
Honestly, I couldn't care less about whose fault the timeline shift is at this point. What matters to me is how we fix it and make sure the client doesn't feel it.
Agreed. And actually, that's exactly the right attitude. I think the most important thing we can do right now is nip this in the bud before it starts affecting the delivery date. If we realign the team and redistribute the workload this week, we still have enough buffer to recover.
Completely agree. I'll schedule a working session for this afternoon. We'll go through everything, identify where the bottlenecks are, and come up with a recovery plan by end of day.
Perfect. That's exactly what this project needs right now. Proactive thinking and quick action. Let's reconvene tomorrow morning and see where we are.
Sounds good. I'll have a full update ready.
Okay, did you catch all 4?
Let's go through them. For all intents and purposes, when I described the research phase as effectively complete, practically done in every meaningful sense.
Begs the question when I asked whether we underestimated the project scope, used in the popular sense, raises the question, prompts us to examine something.
Couldn't care less when I made clear that assigning blame was not a priority. Zero interest in who's at fault, maximum interest in finding the solution.
And nip it in the bud when I suggested addressing the timeline issue immediately, while it's still small and manageable, before it grows into something that affects delivery.
Completely agree. All 4 in one 5-minute Monday morning conversation that could genuinely happen in any professional setting in the English-speaking world.
And that's the point. These aren't expressions for special occasions. They belong in real, everyday professional life. And now you know how to use them correctly. Okay, I want to go back to one specific moment in that role play because there was something happening beneath the surface that I think most people probably let go past, but it's actually doing something quite sophisticated.
Which moment? My line. I couldn't care less about whose fault the timeline shift is at this point. What matters to me is how we fix it and make sure the client doesn't feel it.
Okay, what's the catch?
So the service reading is simple. Couldn't care less. Used correctly. Zero interest in blame. Fine. But look at the full structure of what I said. I used couldn't care less not just to express indifference. I used it as a pivot, a professional redirect. I'm not just saying I don't care about blame. I'm signaling that blame is the wrong conversation to have, and I'm moving everyone's attention to the right conversation, which is the solution.
And that is exactly what highly fluent professional speakers do with this expression. They don't just use it to dismiss something, they use it to redirect, to move the conversation from what doesn't matter to what does.
So the full structure is, I couldn't care less about X, dismissing the unproductive thing. What matters is Y, redirecting to the productive thing. And when you can do that naturally in a meeting, it signals leadership, clarity, focus.
It says, I am not interested in wasting time on things that won't help us. I am interested in solving the actual problem. That is a very powerful professional impression to make.
And it all happens inside one expression, used with intention, not just as a way of saying, I don't care about this, but as a strategic move in a real conversation.
That is the difference between knowing what an expression means and truly owning it. And now you own it. Before the challenge, I want to say something that I think is worth sitting with for a moment.
Go ahead.
Every expression we cover today has been used incorrectly by millions of people, including confident people, including educated people, including people who would consider themselves highly fluent in English. And yet, those people were still understood. They still had their conversations. They still communicated. The world did not stop.
And that's an important thing to remember as a learner. Making a mistake with an expression is not a disaster. It is a stage of learning. Everyone passes through it.
But here's the distinction that matters. Knowing the correct version, understanding the logic behind the expression, knowing its history and its nuance, that changes something inside the way you carry the language.
It moves you from hoping you sound right to knowing you are right. And that difference in confidence changes how you speak, how you're perceived, and ultimately how far the language takes you.
Today, you got 4 corrections, 4 upgrades, 4 moments where the logic clicked and the language made a little more sense. That is not a small thing.
That is exactly what this channel is for.
Today's challenge, and this one is specifically designed to feel slightly uncomfortable in the best way possible.
Today, we want you to find one real moment in your day, a conversation, a message, a meeting, where you would normally say, I could care less, and replace it with, I couldn't care less.
Just that one word change. Notice how it feels to say the correct version. Notice if anyone reacts differently. Notice if you feel more precise and more confident saying it.
And if you want an extra challenge, use for all intents and purposes in a professional context today. Describe something that is effectively complete or effectively true, and use the expression to say it cleanly and confidently.
One expression in one real moment. That is the whole challenge. Because using a new expression in a real conversation, even once, is worth more than reading about it 100 times.
And if you do it, tell us in the comments. We read every single one, and we genuinely love hearing about your real-world English use. Okay, that is today's episode. 4 expressions, 4 corrections, 4 moments when the English you thought you knew became the English you actually know.
For all intents and purposes, nip it in the bud, I couldn't care less, beg the question. You have all 4. The correct versions, the real meanings, the full stories, and the confidence to use them.
And in our next episode, we are going somewhere genuinely fascinating. We are covering the expressions that English speakers use when they want to say something difficult without saying it directly.
The art of English indirectness. What people actually mean when they say, that's an interesting approach, or I'll keep that in mind, or we should definitely catch up sometime.
Spoiler, none of those mean what they appear to mean, not even close.
That episode might genuinely change how you hear every English conversation you've ever had.
Subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on notifications so you don't miss it, and leave a comment below telling us which expression from today surprised you the most.
We will see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.
And remember, couldn't, not could. You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.